Folks at home, welcome back to the Crimson Oak Pond, and if you're new to this series, we built this 5-acre pond over the past year, and it took us several months to get all of the dirt excavated, and we had to bring in several truckloads of clay. And we also built an island, a dock, and got all the structure in place, and then it took a couple of months to get it full of water. After that, we stocked it with a bunch of bait fish, including bluegills and threadfin shad, and not long after that, we stocked it with these little 2-inch aggressive bass. And we're going to be giving you an update on them here in just a minute and showing you how big they've gotten. But before we get into that, we've got several exciting things to tell you about. If you missed our last video, our tiger bass are spawning in the pond, and that's resulted in hundreds of newly hatched baby bass. And speaking of spawning, we're in the middle of a threadfin shad spawn, and the pond is slam-packed with bait right now. We're also going to talk about our newest project where we're creating an exact 3D model of the pond and all the structure in it, and we're going to carve that into a table and create a replica of the pond. But the most exciting news of all is we're moving our 2 pet bass, Bonnie and Clyde, from the backyard pond into the 5-acre pond. And for those of you that are new to the channel, Bonnie and Clyde are what got us started in aquariums and backyard ponds, and even the reason we built the 5-acre pond. And it's hard to believe that it's been 7 years since we caught them. Let's take a quick look at that. Here he is. Look at there. That is a little one. And Liz has one. You got one too? Oh Lord, we've been fishing for an hour and ain't got a bite, and all of a sudden we double up off this tree. That's perfect. These would be 2 perfect bass to go in the aquarium. What do you guys think? We're gonna need some help naming them. And we started them out in our 50-gallon aquarium with a big crawfish, and it didn't take them long to outgrow it, so we had a custom 300-gallon aquarium built. And after 8 months of heavy feeding, they outgrew that as well. And they're currently living in our backyard pond, where they've gotten a lot bigger. We'll be seeing exactly how big they are here in just a moment. And they've lived in this pond since 2018. And now that we finally got the 5-acre pond established and full of bait, it's time for the move. So I'm building a transport tank for them, and I'm basically going to put a pump down on the bottom of the tank, and that'll recirculate the water and hopefully provide them plenty of oxygen. It's about a 20-minute ride. Alright, I got the tank about halfway full right here. I'm going to use the rest of that space for pond water whenever we get out there to the pond. I got the aerator hooked up to a 12-volt battery. Also got a backup tank just in case the plug goes bad. I think we got everything covered. Alright, it's time to get started. I went out and got 2 of the biggest nets I could find, and we're about to start the moving process. So Bonnie's over here, and Clyde's over here. We're going to try to get them both over here and kind of wall it off with one of those nets. That way they can't go hiding in the coves over there. Clyde's going to make that a little difficult. Alright, we got them both down here in the deep end. Alright, there's Bonnie. Oh man, she's still full of eggs. I didn't think right here in May she would still have the eggs in her. Close that up. Oh, we got crappie. So we're not going to put this guy in, but my goodness, he is a giant now. Can't have any crappie in the pond. There's Clyde. Oh boy. They're all healthy, that's for sure. Alright, I believe we got Mr. Jekyll. Guys, that is one gigantic bluegill right there. Man, he is massive. Alright, we made it out here to the pond. All the fish are doing good. The next thing we're going to do is take some of this pond water and start slowly pouring it into here, because a lot of those parameters are different in that water and their existing backyard pond water. Alright, it is time. I've slowly filled up this tank with pond water all the way to the surface in 15-minute intervals. Fish look like they're still doing great. Kind of sad knowing this may be the last time I ever see them, but I got pretty good faith that we can catch them here in the future. So I think I'm just gonna walk them right out here in the shallow area, release them. Hopefully they'll go down deep and just settle in, and then I'll keep an eye on them the rest of the day, make sure they acclimate. The tank temp's measuring 72 and the pond temp's measuring 76. That should be close enough. Now we're gonna weigh and tag the fish first, but it may be kind of hard to weigh the bluegill. So I think the best way to do it is gonna be to put him in this bucket, and I'm gonna weigh it before I put him in, and then I'm gonna weigh it after we put him in, and hopefully that'll be pretty accurate for him. Not sure which one's gonna go first. All right, Bonnie is going first. We're gonna tag her real quick. She is about 20.5 inches long. Alright, Bonnie is 5'7", 1171. Alright, here's the question everybody wanted to know. How big was Bonnie? 5.26 pounds. Wow. She's a big girl. Man, she's bigger than I thought. Alright, Bonnie. It's been fun. Hope that we catch you again in the future. Take care, girl. Alright, here's Clyde. He is 17 inches long. Clyde is going to be 571002. Alright, and Clyde weighs 3.5 pounds. Alright, buddy. Enjoy your 5-acre pond. See how fast you can find Bonnie. He's turning around coming back to me. Went straight down and sat on the bottom. He's always been a lazy fish. Alright, the bluegill bucket is 26.1. We got him in there. He takes up the whole bucket. Jekyll's a big boy. 27.4. Almost 27.5. So he is over a pound. Probably like 1.25 pounds to close to 1.5 pounds. If you guys can see it, there's a bass on bed right there. If you missed the last video, we added those little nesting sites. He just eased off of there. See you later, buddy. I feel like if they'll get on out there deeper, that's where that cooler water is. Now let's talk about a new project that I'm excited to tell you guys about. We're creating a 3D model of the pond, and we're going to carve it into a tabletop. And we're collaborating with Nate over at NateMakes. And you guys have probably seen him in the past. He's worked with us on the duck house and the eagle tower. And Nate's extremely talented and creative when it comes to ideas like this. And he's capturing every depth change and piece of structure in the pond, including the oak throne, the dock, and the table's even going to have our underwater green lights that'll be displayed as LEDs. But nearly all of this footage, including the final table, is going to be over on Nate's channel, and I'll put a link down in the video description. So do me a favor and subscribe to his channel. You're not going to want to miss this one. And now that we've got the pond modeled in software, we're working with another company called UID to install antennas at all the structure points throughout the pond. So not only will these tags work with the RFID scanner, but they also make these antennas that you can customize and put beneath the surface of the water or anywhere around the pond. And biologists have used these methods for years in streams to track trout and to collect data for travel patterns for fish throughout rivers and streams across the world. But my idea is to put several of these antennas throughout the pond. So we may start off putting one around the dock and one around the tunnels we've added to the pond. So each time a fish swims through the tunnel, it'll get scanned and we'll have that data. And we're going to stream this map live, so a little red dot, including the fish's name, will pop up on this map, showing their exact location in the pond. And so even though we may not be able to see Bonnie or Clyde, this is going to allow us to keep track of them and hopefully get some cool data about how these fish that have lived in an aquarium for years react to their new pond lifestyle. And in our last video, we put out these spawning beds and we basically filled them up with gravel, and they've been a big success. Every one that we put out has had fish spawning in it. And with the spawn comes lots of new baby bass. They've been hanging out in the shallow areas around the algae, trying to hide from all the other predators. But unfortunately, the statistics aren't good for these little guys. On average, only 1 to 2 of these will survive to adulthood, and their chances of making it that big are 0.02%. That's not good odds. And look at this little guy hanging around the fry. It looks like a small male bass, and usually their jobs are to protect the fry. But that sometimes only lasts 3 to 5 days, and then after they stop protecting them, they're fair game. So in some cases, the males will even turn around and start eating their own fry. And the bluegills are still on bed. We just recently had another full moon, and they'll spawn several times throughout the summer. But speaking of the full moon in May, you have to talk about some of the most prolific spawners, and that's the threadfin shad. That's why they've become one of the best forage species for largemouth bass, because every shad spawn can result in thousands of new bait fish, which will basically repopulate the food source for these bass. But I know a man named JR that says he didn't want his fish to have to swim to eat, he just wanted them to open their mouths. And I think we replicated that as much as possible, because the pond is loaded with bait right now, and it's a perfect time to add Bonnie and Clyde. And now, instead of eating the golden shiners we fed them the last 7 years, they're going to have an unlimited shad buffet. Alright, time to give you an update on the prawns. If you missed our video a few weeks ago, we put 2,500 prawns in there and roughly 2,500 in the little stock tank. And they're basically a mix between a shrimp and a crawfish. They got really long pinchers, but we stocked these at post-larva size. They were about 1/4 of an inch long, and they're growing fast. I've been feeding them protein pellets every day, about 2 to 3 times a day. And the plan is to supplement or basically feed these to the bass here in the next couple of months. It's about the highest protein source you can get for a bass, and it'll create some extremely fast growth rates, which is what we're shooting for. That's a really cool shot. You can see each one of those shrimp swimming around carrying one of those protein pellets. But since this video is dedicated to Bonnie and Clyde, I wanted to show you a couple of my favorite memories of them in the tanks, because we used to feed them a lot of different things like frogs and shrimp. That was always a lot of fun. And believe it or not, when Clyde was just a young guy, he was actually as aggressive as Moby. And you'd see a lot of those big explosions. But the one other thing that stands out is that Bonnie is lucky to be alive, because about 5 years ago, one early morning, she actually jumped out of the aquarium and was flopping around on our kitchen floor. And just by a lucky random chance, we were taking our dog Milo out for a walk. And rather than running out the door, he ran into the kitchen. So we went in there to see what was going on. And poor Bonnie was on her last breath. So we resuscitated her, moving her back and forth in the aquarium, and it took a couple of hours, but eventually she was able to swim away on her own. So Bonnie's one lucky fish, and a big thanks to Milo. He got extra treats that day. But look at how tiny they were when we moved them from the 300-gallon aquarium to the backyard pond. I'm guessing they were probably somewhere around 1 pound to 1.5 pounds. So that means Bonnie's gained about 4 pounds living in the backyard pond, and that averages about 1 pound a year. So hopefully with all that bait in the 5-acre pond, maybe she'll reach 10 pounds one day. Now it's time for a wildlife update. Got one of those newly hatched turtles hanging out on his log. But April and May have been the month of the birds. Lots of flocks of birds have been coming around the pond. We've been planting fields, and a lot of times all that tractor work will draw them in. But I hope these guys don't ever get an appetite for shrimp, because it looks like they could easily wipe out the prawn pond. And it's been a little while since we've seen the fox squirrel that we call Foxy. He loves it this time of year too, because whenever the tractors are around, he knows that means more peanuts. You can see, that's his symbol. Him saying, send more peanuts. And the bluegills are still doing good, just as aggressive as ever. Even though it's spawning season, they'll come off their nest to go eat those protein pellets. Alright, it's time to tag some fish, or if we catch a bass that's already been tagged, we're going to measure it right here on this scale and get an updated weight. But this will be the first time we fish the pond now that Bonnie and Clyde are living in it, so interested to see if they'll bite an artificial lure. And since we've got some algae down there on the bottom, a perfect setup for this is a drop shot rig, because that weight will sit down there on the bottom and the bait will hover up over it about 8 inches above the bottom. And since we just stocked a ton of threadfin shad in the pond, we're going to go with little finesse shad looking baits. Got one. He's a jumper. Little belly on him. This guy is 12 inches long. And he is 57,111. Look at him. He chased it up. Look at him. He chased it up right here to the dock. That was pretty cool. That was an aggressive one. Nice and healthy. Alright, this one is 13 inches long. and has already been caught before. It is 569975. And this particular fish is named Cypress. We caught him back in November, and it looks like he's gained 2.5 inches. And you can tell from the old video clip of him that he's definitely gotten bigger. But he didn't move very far. We caught him about 15 feet from where we caught him last time. All right, we got an aggressive one. I can tell by the way that one's chasing that bait. Got him. Oh yeah, nice one. Hadn't been caught yet. All right, this guy's 570540. And he weighs 1.12 pounds. Righty. Yep. He bit at the cast before that, and I didn't catch him. You can see a little lump right there in the side of him where he's been eating shad. 11 1/4 inches. Alright, I had a couple fish chasing the bait as I was reeling it in, so I'm moving over to something faster, and that's the perfect imitation of those thread fins we just put in. There we go. On the trap. Alright, he is 11 inches, and his tag is 571101. There's a nice one. Alright, this one's been caught. 1569548. Her new length is 13 inches, and her weight is 1.27 pounds. And here's a quick look at the updated tag spreadsheet. So we're letting you guys name the first 104 bass that we tag. So if you see a letter of the alphabet that doesn't have a name filled out in it yet, leave a fish name comment below. And if we end up selecting your name and you make this list, basically your bass will be competing against the other bass in the pond. And here's a look at several of the challenges and prizes that we're going to be giving away. Now it's time to report on some of the mischievous activities happening at night. You know, the raccoons are always up to no good. And here lately we've been leaving the door on the duck house open because we're trying to get them out of the house and living in the pond and on the island. Well, one of the hens is still nesting inside the house, so naturally that's going to bring in the predators. And if you'll notice, one of those sets of eyes doesn't look like the rest, and that's one of those raccoons. I don't think he really wants to harm the ducks, but I think he is after the duck eggs. And I think he eventually runs the duck off and raids the nest. And look at him even trying to open the cabinet attached to the duck house. Raccoons are some funny creatures. So probably for the last month and a half, I've been trying to get the ducks over to the pond. But I started running out of ideas because they would fly around it and even land in it from time to time, but they always came back to the duck house. We even tried moving their food and water bowls down near the pond, still no luck. But one day this past week, 5 wild ducks flew into the pond, and that's all it took. The moment our pet ducks saw them in the pond, they swam over there to them, and even learned some of the new bobbing techniques that ducks do, where they go down and fish around the bottom for algae and different types of food. So even though it took a while, we were finally successful of getting the ducks to move into the pond. And an update on some other pond birds. We got the great blue heron flying into the island. Probably going to snack on some of those shad or other small fish. But every once in a while, things work out in your favor in nature. And it just so happens this afternoon, the juvenile bald eagle wanted that spot on Alcatraz Island. So he dropped in and claimed his spot. Gotta love it. And our baby boy Oliver's doing great. One of his favorite parts of the day is taking a nap on the stroll around the pond. And there's the old good doggy Milo. And last but not least, Sarah cruising on the Jeep. So now that we moved Bonnie and Clyde out of the backyard pond, you know what that means for our other fish. So our smallest bass, Tiger, is going to get moved out of this tank into the 300-gallon aquarium. And Moby's going to get moved out of the 300-gallon into the backyard pond. And now it's time to feed Mr. Moby. Alright folks, that is going to wrap up this video. Make sure to hit that subscribe button to follow along with all the pond builds and wild animals we have out here at the farm. But I hope y'all enjoyed this one, and we will see you all next time.